Hi, I'm Stephanie, the owner of Fresh Flowers LLC. Today I'm going to talk about gluten-free baking. Since the beginning of the pandemic, my stepson Russell has been quarantined with us, and Russell has celiac. So I have been doing a lot of gluten-free baking. You might have noticed it on my Instagram feed. So we've been doing a lot of experimenting with different flours and different recipes. And today I'm going to share with you some of our favorites. Just like in any industry, our industry has some superstars. And all three of our recipes come from baking superstars. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Dorie Greenspan. And I'm not selling any product. I'm just telling you from all the testing we've done, these were what we consider to be our favorites. So the first is the chocolate chip recipe from Dorie Greenspan's book, Baking, which is really a Bible for bakers. If you don't have it and you love to bake, you should definitely get this cookbook. One of the best chocolate chip recipes I find is Dorie Greenspan's chocolate chip cookies. Very easy to make, and the recipe is in this cookbook. I've also found that if you use cup for cup flour, which is Thomas Keller's from the French Laundry, Thomas Keller's gluten-free flour, all-purpose gluten-free flour, and the idea of it, cup for cup, is that you can substitute it for any recipe using all-purpose flour. Baking is really chemistry, and Dorie Greenspan's chocolate chip cookies made with cup for cup flour we find to be crisp and absolutely delicious chocolate chip cookies, gluten-free. Cup for cup flour also makes a wholesome flour, which is not whole wheat flour because obviously there's no wheat. It's made with brown rice, but this wholesome flour can be also used as a substitute for whole wheat flour. And on the Cup for Cup website, they actually have quite a few very good recipes using both the all-purpose flour and the wholesome flour. And the flour is a little expensive. That's the only drawback. But honestly, it is such a good substitute in any recipe for all-purpose flour. And you can find recipes for gluten-free flour to make it yourself online. There are many different recipes. One of them that I tried was Zoe Bakes. On her website, she has a recipe for gluten-free flour. But honestly, I think Cup for Cup is the best gluten-free flour. You can really use it in any recipe. And the next superstar I'm going to talk about is Erin Jeanne McDowell, who is a recipe developer. She has written, I believe, 2 cookbooks, and the third is coming out. Her recipes appear a lot in the New York Times Cooking, which is where this recipe comes from. This is a gluten-free chocolate chip cookie, and it is made with almond flour. There are many different gluten-free flours you can use: almond flour, coconut flour, rice flour, brown rice flour. Almond flour in these chocolate chip cookies is really terrific. One of the things about it is it has a little bit of grain to it. Here's the finished cookie, what it looks like. And this particular cookie, I added at the end a little bit of Maldon sea salt before I baked them in the oven, which the sea salt just brings out a little bit more of the chocolate flavor. And it's the same idea as salty sweet. For those of you who love chocolate covered pretzels the way I love chocolate covered pretzels, this cookie, the salty sweet, is really terrific. And if you want to change it up a little bit, I substituted the chocolate chips for chocolate chunk, and I also added some dried Bing cherries for a dried cherry chocolate chunk gluten-free cookie with the almond flour. It is absolutely terrific. The cookie is crisp, but it does have a little bit of a texture. It tastes almost like a really great version of Chips Ahoy chocolate chip cookies. And again, you can find this recipe. I'm going to try and link it on my Instagram feed, but you can find it in the New York Times Cooking. And lastly, I'm going to talk about our third superstar is Christina Tosi. Christina Tosi is an amazing baker, so fun, high energy, and if you have not watched her 2 p.m. live Instagram feed that she's done since the beginning of the pandemic, she's missed a couple of days when things got really rough, but basically at 2 p.m. every day, Christina has shared recipes online, live. If you sign up on her website, you get the recipes from Bake Club. And one of the recipes that I don't even remember what day it was because I periodically watch them. And I do get the emails every day of what she's baking. And one of the recipes was for peanut butter sandies. And the peanut butter sandies are actually made with pretzel flour, which we've tried many different gluten-free snacks. We have tried lentil snacks, green pea snacks, corn, rice, all kinds of gluten-free snacks. These Snyder's gluten-free pretzels taste just like regular pretzels. So it gave me a good idea when I saw the recipe for pretzel flour to use gluten-free pretzels to make the pretzel flour. And it is so simple. You put the pretzels in the Cuisinart and you grind them to a pretty fine consistency. You can see here that it actually looks like flour, but you can make it as chunky, or you can leave a few pieces of pretzels. You can make it fine, or you can make it with a little bit of chunk. I also added some peanuts with the pretzels when I ground it in the Cuisinart, just to add a little more crunch to the cookie, which really is terrific. So the cookies are basically a regular peanut butter cookie, which there are many gluten-free peanut butter cookies that are great. But again, the idea of the salty pretzels with the sweet of the peanut butter and the brown sugar that's in the cookie is again the same idea of salty sweet. And these cookies are terrific, crunchy, and so good. I did a little fork tines on mine just to give it a little different of a look. And if you want to change it up a little, which of course I love to play around with recipes, I added chocolate chunks to this, and again, a little bit of the Malden sea salt. You can just see it on the top. Malden sea salt is pretty coarse, but you could also add a finer sea salt if you want. And again, this cookie is salty, sweet, crunchy, and delicious. So you can find the recipe for this on Christina Tosi's website if you go to Bake Club, or you could search for peanut butter sandies. And again, if you want gluten-free, use gluten-free pretzels instead of regular pretzels for your pretzel flour, and you have a winner gluten-free cookie. So that's my advice. And I just also want to show you, when people ask me, where do you get your recipes from? I'm actually a recipe junkie. So one of my quarantine projects, which I have not quite gotten to yet, all of these recipes need to be sorted. And I normally don't put recipes into my recipe books until I have actually made it and tried it and decided it's a recipe that I want to keep. And probably in this house, I could not even begin to count how many recipes I have. So we've now been in quarantine for, I think we're going on 4 months. So this is a project that I haven't quite gotten to. And every day I keep printing and adding recipes to this pile, which is also a little crazy. But just so you know, when people ask me, I do maybe use a crumb of one recipe and an inside of another recipe and a little of this and a little of that. So I will try and put the link to the recipes that I've shared today on my Instagram feed, and happy baking.